Hilary and I made a promise that we wouldn't rest until Hannah's killer was brought to justice. 4 years later, that promise is still a long way from being honoured, but we are no less determined. Our lives are now totally preoccupied with achieving justice for Hannah, and this responsibility is physically and emotionally exhausting.
A 17-year-old girl vanished after a night that was never meant to be dangerous. When the investigation began to unravel, her parents refused to accept silence and took their search for answers far beyond borders. Hannah Foster was not the kind of teenager people worried about. She was diligent, soft-spoken, and deeply considerate, the type who checked in with her parents if she was running late and never pushed boundaries for the sake of rebellion. Teachers often spoke of her future with certainty, convinced she would one day become a doctor. Caring for others came naturally to Hannah. It was where she felt most at peace. On a cool Friday evening in March, Hannah met up with a friend for a casual night out. They started at a familiar pub called The Hobbit, chatting over drinks before deciding to move on to sober. The atmosphere never quite lifted. They didn't bump into anyone they knew, and the night felt flat ordinary. By around 10:30 p.m., the girls agreed it was time to go home. Hannah's friend waited with her at the bus stop, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. When the bus finally arrived, she hesitated, asking Hannah one last time if she was sure she didn't want company. "It's fine," Hannah replied with a small smile. "It's not far." She turned and began the short walk home, less than half a mile through streets she knew well, a route she had taken countless times before. Her footsteps faded into the quiet of the night as the bus pulled away. That was the last confirmed sighting of Hannah Foster. By morning, her phone was silent. Hours passed. Then panic set in. What should have been a brief walk home became a mystery that would haunt her. Family and spark a relentless search for the truth. It was 5 a.m. and there was no Hannah, her father would later tell journalists. "We texted her. We called her. The calls were going through, but she wasn't answering." At first, her parents tried to stay calm. Hannah was responsible, reliable to a fault. Surely there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd decided to stay over at her friend's place. Maybe her phone battery had died. They told themselves not to panic, even as the hours stretched on and the silence became unbearable. But by 10:30 that morning, hope gave way to fear. Hannah hadn't checked in. No messages, no missed calls returned. The Fosters contacted the police. Officers responded immediately. While one team sat with Hannah's parents, carefully retracing her final known movements, other officers were dispatched to walk the route she should have taken home the night before. It was a short walk, quiet residential streets, familiar ground. They knocked on doors, spoke to residents, and searched for anything out of place. No one had seen Hannah. No one had heard a disturbance. No cameras had captured anything unusual. Then attention turned to Hannah's phone, and what investigators uncovered changed everything. Although her phone continued to receive calls and messages, cell tower data revealed something deeply unsettling. The device wasn't stationary. It was moving, rapidly connecting to different towers in a pattern consistent with travel by car. Hannah hadn't walked away. She was being taken somewhere. The most chilling discovery came next. Shortly after Hannah vanished, her phone had attempted to dial a 999 emergency call. The call didn't connect properly, but police were able to recover and enhance the recording. What they heard sent a shock through the investigation. In the background, Hannah's voice could be heard, frightened, controlled, trying not to draw attention. Then, clearly, another voice, a man with a South Asian accent speaking close to the phone. He said, "Keep your head down." At that moment, any lingering doubt disappeared. This was not a case of a teenager who had stayed out too late. This was not a misunderstanding. This was an abduction. And somewhere, Hannah Foster was still alive, at least at the moment that call was made, depending on strangers to find her before time ran out. Just 24 hours into the investigation, police delivered the call every parent dreads. A young woman's body had been found in bushes beside a roadway in Southampton. It was Hannah. The confirmation shattered any remaining hope. Her parents were summoned to identify their daughter, a moment that would replay in their minds for the rest of their lives. When they told us, it was like the world stopped spinning. Hannah's mother, Hilary Foster, later said, "You hear about these things happening to other families, but you never imagine it will be yours. You can never prepare yourself for those words." Investigators quickly determined that Hannah had been the victim of a violent attack. The autopsy confirmed she had been assaulted and killed, marking the case as a homicide from the outset. Forensic teams collected DNA left behind by the killer. The evidence at the time seemed promising, but when the profile was run through national criminal databases, it led nowhere. No match, no name, no immediate suspect. Days later, a crucial break came from an unexpected place. Hannah's personal belongings, her bag, and her mobile phone were recovered at a recycling facility. Investigators realized that items had been thrown into a recycling bin rather than regular waste, meaning they had been collected, transported, and preserved rather than destroyed. It was a small mistake by the killer, but one that would become vital. Then came the turning point. Hannah's case was featured on the BBC program Crime Watch, which reconstructed her final movements and appealed directly to the public for help. During the broadcast, police released CCTV images of a distinctive, large silver and white van seen along the routes traced by Hannah's phone on the night she disappeared. The response was immediate. One call stood out. A local shop owner contacted police saying the van looked identical to one used by his sandwich delivery employee. Investigators moved quickly, focusing on Hazelwood Foods, a delivery company operating in the area that night. They reviewed staff records, work routes, and schedules, narrowing their attention to drivers who had been nearby during the critical time window. One employee in particular raised concern. He had arrived at work the morning after Hannah vanished with visible scratches on his face and complained of intense back pain. His behavior was noted by co-workers and later reported to police. His name was Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. He was 41 years old, married, a father of two, and had moved to the UK from India 8 years earlier. To neighbors and colleagues, he appeared unremarkable. To investigators, he was becoming impossible to ignore. When police finally seized Kohli's van, the case shifted dramatically. Inside the vehicle, investigators uncovered a carrier bag containing a metal bat, along with other forensic traces that immediately raised alarms. Laboratory testing later confirmed what detectives feared. The biological evidence recovered from the van matched samples taken from Hannah. The vehicle that had carried her away now carried the truth. With the evidence mounting, officers moved quickly to arrest Kohli, but they were already too late. When police arrived at his home, the house was empty. Kohli's wife and children were staying with her parents. Kohli himself had vanished. His wife told investigators that his mother in India had fallen seriously ill and that he had flown out to be by her side. It was a story that did not hold. Police soon realized Kohli hadn't left out of family duty. He had fled. He knew the net was tightening and he had escaped just in time. British authorities immediately contacted police in India, requesting assistance in locating and detaining him. but the response was slow and uncommitted. With limited resources and countless local cases competing for attention, Kohli's capture was not treated as a priority. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. The investigation stalled completely. Hannah's killer was living freely in India, while her parents remained trapped in a nightmare, knowing who had taken their daughter, knowing where he was, and yet powerless to bring him to justice. It was during this agonizing standstill that Hillary and Trevor Foster made a decision few could imagine. We realized that if we wanted justice for Hannah, we would have to go and get it ourselves, Trevor later said. Against all expectations, the grieving parents boarded a plane to India. They had no badge, no authority, no guarantees, only a photograph of their daughter and an unbreakable resolve. Their plan was simple but overwhelming. They gave television interviews, distributed leaflets in busy streets, and spoke openly about the daughter they had lost and the man responsible for her death.
Hillary and I made a promise that we wouldn't rest until Hannah's killer was brought to justice.
During one televised appeal, Hillary struggled to hold back tears. "We're just parents," she said. "We're not police officers. We're not detectives. We're simply a mother and father who want justice for our daughter." The public listened. What official requests had failed to achieve, human heartbreak accomplished. A telephone hotline was established, and soon calls began pouring in, tips, sightings, and whispers of a man trying desperately to stay hidden. For the first time in over a year, the case began to move again. And Hannah Foster's parents were the ones who had set it in motion. Among the flood of tips, one call stood out. A taxi driver contacted police to say he recognized the suspect immediately. The man he knew went by the name Mike Dennis and had become a regular customer. According to the driver, Mike claimed to be from the UK and said he was in India visiting family. But there was something unusual about him. Every morning, the driver said, Mike would buy a newspaper, scan the headlines quickly, almost frantically, then throw it away. It became clear he wasn't reading for interest. He was checking to see if his crime had been discovered. As more information poured in, investigators uncovered an even more alarming truth. Under his false identity, Kohli had secured work at a Red Cross facility, claiming to be a doctor affiliated with the World Health Organization. In reality, he had no medical qualifications at all. He was administering vaccinations to children, an act that horrified authorities and further underscored how dangerous his deception had become. Then came the most urgent warning. Intelligence suggested Kohli was moving closer to the Nepal border. If he crossed into Nepal, which had no extradition treaty with either India or the UK, he would effectively disappear forever. Time was running out. Delhi police alerted officers stationed near the border, but all they could provide was a basic description: a man wearing a red shirt, clean-shaven, traveling with a woman. It seemed almost impossible that such limited information would be enough. And yet, against all odds, it was. An undercover officer spotted a man matching the description preparing to board a bus headed toward Nepal. Beside him was a woman. They were stopped and detained just 30 minutes before crossing the border. Kohli was finally in custody. During questioning, he reportedly said he was exhausted from running and ready to confess.
Abducted, raped and killed Hannah Foster. And I want to unburden myself. I totally want to tell the truth, what happened there that night. She was crossing the road, I was coming out of the Maninder pub. My van was parked on the same road where she is walking. And I just picked my van and I came, on the other road and I saw her again. Then I stopped my vehicle, and I abducted her. I was totally drunk that night. I told her the truth that my mother is very ill in India. I want to go to see her as well, and it is very very bad luck for me. I was totally blank that night. My head was, and I done that crime, and she was not agreed, and I just strangled her. Like just the whole with that way, and put a hand on her mouth and killed her.
The woman with him was identified as his new wife, someone he had married while living under a false identity. She had no knowledge of his past, no idea he was already married in the UK, and no clue about the crime he had committed. Kohli had built an entirely new life while Hannah's family lived in unrelenting grief. The arrest should have brought relief. Instead, it marked the beginning of another painful chapter. Kohli's legal team in India launched an aggressive campaign to prevent his extradition. They filed over 100 legal motions and more than 20 appeals, exploiting every possible loophole. Kohli himself repeatedly claimed to be ill to delay court proceedings. For 3 more years, Hannah's parents waited. They had found their daughter's killer, but justice remained just out of reach.
This delay is unfair on us, and if the accused is innocent, just as unfair on him. No one is benefiting from this delay. Nobody can get on with his or her life until a decision is reached on extradition. It can't be allowed to drag on indefinitely.
Finally, in October 2008, more than 5 years after Hannah's murder, approval was granted to extradite Kohli to the UK as he was being processed by police. An officer overheard him mutter casually, "You win some, you lose some," a chilling reminder of his lack of remorse. At trial, prosecutors reconstructed the events of that March night using evidence, witness statements, and Kohli's own earlier admissions. They established that he had been drinking alone before encountering Hannah as she walked home. The attack, they argued, was sudden and opportunistic. Despite previously confessing, Kohli attempted to change his story in court, claiming he had been forced to commit the crime by an unnamed group, an allegation never raised during years of investigation. The jury rejected his claims. The evidence was overwhelming. Maninder Pal Singh Kohli was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 24 years.
Well, perhaps the end of the city nightmare, though of course it's too early to tell, but also time for closure for the family of British teenager Hannah Foster, raped and murdered 5 years ago.
The Indian taxi driver Maninder Pal Singh Kohli, accused of raping and murdering her, was today sentenced to 24 years in jail in a UK court. This is 5 years after he committed the crime. The 17-year-old was raped and murdered after a night out in Southampton in March 2003.
For Hannah's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but no true relief. "We did what we had to do," Trevor Foster said afterward. "We couldn't bring Hannah back, but we could make sure the man who took her from us could never hurt anyone else." Hannah Foster was a bright, compassionate young woman with dreams of becoming a doctor, dreams that were stolen in a moment of senseless violence. Yet her story is also one of extraordinary parental courage. When institutions failed and justice stalled, Hillary and Trevor Foster refused to accept defeat. Their journey to India was not just a search for a fugitive, it was a testament to the power of love, determination, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Today, Kohli remains in prison, expected to be eligible for release around 2030. Many investigators have questioned whether Hannah was his first victim. But because her parents refused to give up, there is one certainty: she was his last. Cases like Hannah Foster's remind us how important it is to stay vigilant, speak up, and support victims of crime. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more true crime investigations. Hit the like button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case.